Welcome, guys. This is me, Shaq Baker, the #1 bread maker, as I'm guaranteed to make that dough rise. And you're watching The Recipe. Now, today's guest is a self-confessed, unconventional hustler. And being one involves a little bit of a whole lot. And as today's guest, you'll see he's an author. He is the host of the Unconventionalist podcast. He's won multiple awards for his work in helping raise 2.8 million euros for men's health. He's got a TED Talk. He's worked with pioneering organizations such as Google, Samsung, to name a few. I tell you what, I'm going to cut it there just so we have some actual space for the show. You know, what I don't want to do is reel off all these stuff and then next minute we've got the credits coming in. So please allow me to introduce today's guest, Mr. Mark Leruste. Thank you for coming on today, brother. I really appreciate it, man.
You should be introducing me at every event I go to, right? Like, just hype me up like that.
That's actually going to be my new side hustle. I'm working on it. I'm working on it. But I just wanted to say, like, I really appreciate you coming on, bro, because you're one of the very, very few people that I receive emails from that make me smile when I get them. When I see Mark's emails, I have a little, what?
I appreciate that, brother. Thanks for saying that. That means a lot.
That's cool, man.
Basically, it's just you and my mum reading my emails, but my mum sends me back all the spelling mistakes and the grammar errors. She was a school teacher for 35 years, so she's always the one that literally just replies, it's there, THEIR, not THERE, because I'm dyslexic. So that's it. That's the love I get from my mum every week.
I definitely need your mum's support. I've only figured that out, like, I think last year.
Yeah.
You know, I properly, like, because I have to actually think about it. I've got to be like, okay, so there. I have to, it's like I'm counting with my fingers. So
yeah, 100%. It's just a different way our brains work, right? It's like for some people, it's just, it makes sense. Like I'm really bad at maths, which is terrible. Like if you're running a business, right? Like I can do basic stuff, but my brain just works differently, and spelling is one of them. Like I'm not terrible. Like I wrote a book. I'm in the middle of writing my second book.
Excellent.
So you know, I got better with time. But yeah.
I'm gonna jump straight in. Explain to me the day in the life of an unconventional hustler, because I'm the hustler, and I want to see if there's any similarities in our day. I'm trying to be like you.
So I don't know where you found unconventional hustler, because I haven't heard that in ages. So the way that came about was when I used to be country manager at the Movember Foundation. We had a dinner with some of the team, and Garen, who was like the country manager in South Africa, was around. We were talking about past histories, and like my very first kind of official job, right? We might get into this a little bit deeper later on, but one of my official kind of first jobs, right, like at a university, was going around the world and interviewing movers and shakers and blah, 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 doing these advertorial reports for newspapers and magazines. And when I was explaining this to this guy called Garona, and I basically just was honest, I said, it was super dodgy, dude. Like we would just go in these countries, set up shop, try and meet the presidents, ministers, CEOs and chairmen. Then we try and heavily sell them these really overpriced advertising spaces in print media. Like give you an example, like a full page in the Wall Street Journal, we're selling for $180,000, which is not that price. If you wanted to go straight direct to the Wall Street Journal, it wouldn't cost you that, but it was contextually based in a report. And he said, he's like, oh, you were a print hustler. Basically, you were a print hustler. And I laughed. And so Unconventional Hustler was born from there, and then Unconventional Hustler, I ditched that, and it became the Unconventionalists. So that, I think it's the first time I've shared this. That is how the Unconventionalist was born. It was out of that joke dinner where it was like, you were a print hustler, oh, you're an unconventional hustler, to actually Unconventionalist is probably more like the name that sounds more like a business, but that's where I went. So that's just on that. And then what a day looks like. Man, it's well, right now we're recording this in 2020. So had you asked me this in 2019, I would have given you a different answer.
Yeah.
Now it's a mix of, my partner and I, we more or less co-parent. She does way more than I do, but at least a day and a half every week I take care of the kids and the Monday morning. So I might be taking care of the kids, and then I might be making phone calls, might be WhatsApping a team. But I'll tell you what though, something, I don't know where it is. I've got this thing, where is it? me try and find, anyway, somewhere. But my day really starts the night before, and this sounds really weird, but the last thing I try and do before I go to bed, I try and do this before I close down and go and play with the kids and stuff, is I'll get my productivity planner out. It's a really simple, it's like $20, $20, whatever it is, or £20, depending where you are. And it's just this really simple tool where I look at the day, I look at what I achieved, I make a comment, how productive did I feel that day? And then I look at tomorrow, like my meetings, my appointments, and I look at what's the number one thing I want to achieve, what's the number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I put an estimated time of how long that's going to take me to complete. And I'm pretty good at keeping track of this. I've been doing this for a few years. It's the gift I give to all my clients. I send them this, and that's kind of how it dictates my day. Then, like today is a weird example, right? But if you want to know about today, the alarm goes off, or my kids wake me up, depending, whatever comes first at 6:30. I had a kind of a body movement session today just to try and get me moving a little bit because I've been super lazy during lockdown. So I went for a stretch, did all that kind of stuff. And then I went straight on it. I submitted the podcast. I had to submit an entry for a podcast awards. So I did that for a while. Then I had back-to-back calls with people, potentially partnerships. Someone was trying to pitch me a product. I got sales calls. And then we're here. And then I do a podcast interview. And then I might have a coaching call this afternoon. And then I might write a newsletter for the weekend. That is just one random day.
Sounds good. I love it because it touches on all the things that you do. And again, I guess that's just an opportunity to lift the bonnet and see what the work is.
And it's eclipsed. And I'll be honest, like I wish I could tell you like Mondays is this. Like even though when I sit with my VA and I'm like, okay, here's the deal. I want all my podcast interviews to be on Thursday, all my podcasts that I interview guests on Tuesday, sales calls on Mondays, coaching clients, but it very rarely sticks to that. There's some flexibility to that, but yeah, it usually involves creating content, connecting with people, coaching clients, creating programs, and sales conversations. That kind of how my week goes by.
Nice. Excellent, man. Excellent. So for all those that don't know you, Mark, tell us a bit more about what you do and how you got to where you are now.
Yeah, I'll try and answer that as quickly as possible, but because that would be like an entire episode, right? The short version of it is, you could probably tell both by my name and a weird twang in my accent, is I was born and raised in France, and my dad's French, my mum's British. So I was kind of born and raised in a dual heritage background, and I grew up in a very archaic educational system. The French system, for anybody listening to this who's sadly experienced the French system, it's super outdated. It's all about, you got to remember and regurgitate. We don't want you to think for yourself. If you've got any ounce of creativity, we're not interested. Oh, wow. And so I really struggle because now obviously I know, I'm dyslexic. And had I been born a few years later, I would have been diagnosed with ADHD and heavily medicated. No offense to people on medication. I wasn't, so I'm grateful for that. But I just never stood still, and I kept on being made wrong. I was held back a year, eventually kicked out when I was 16, went into this kind of school where I ended up with my mates in school. And I love this, but this, honestly, I look back and go, this was like one amazing experience, but people in my classmates were robbing houses and selling drugs. And that was kind of my new environment. Like I was like in this extremely privileged background, suddenly thrown into this different school. And I'm like, so I started selling weed and that kind of stuff. And that's where I learned my first business principles about supply and demand, seasonal supply and demand, debt collection, avoiding, like it was just one of those kind of, experiences, I guess, that I look back and. So throughout my life, I kept on challenging the status quo. I think that is one of the common themes where I kept on saying, if someone told me you can't do this, I was like, well, watch me. Someone said to me, you'll never do anything but becoming a bin man. And there's nothing wrong with being a bin man. We need bin men and bin women, and they're amazing. And I don't think there should be a stigma or shame around that. But that was kind of the aspiration that they were putting on me. Yeah. And just because I couldn't spell, they were like, you're a thick ass dude, you're never going to get anything done. And I was like, you just watch me. And so I ended up going to university, to a pretty good university. I ended up getting like a pretty good mark. I was like top of my family. My dad never went to uni. My mum was one of the first girls of a generation to go, and got a good degree, and then did the whole classic thing, got a good job that on the outside looked amazing. I was traveling around the world in these exotic locations, hanging out with, I met Daniel Craig in Lithuania in a bar, and it was just like this crazy world, but deep down there was something wrong, and I didn't know what that was, right? Like a lot of people might relate to this. It's like, you don't know what it is, but you know that this isn't it, and there's something quite off. So I didn't know this, but basically what you're referring to, what we're talking about, are core values, right? Okay. And so So I just was out of alignment with what my core values were. I was working for an organization that was super dodgy, thus the name on, print media hustler, whatever that was. But I got to discover, honestly, looking back now, especially now as an adult, as a parent, I was so lucky to have those years as a formative experience. People go off to do MBAs and post degrees and masters. I had like the school of life. I lived in Kazakhstan, Lithuania, South Africa, the Gambia, Peru, Cyprus, like you name it, right? Like in these countries, and I met different cultures, different people, and I learned so much about life. I was more fascinated about the conversation with a taxi driver who during the apartheid had to remember why to be proud of being black in a country that made you feel wrong for being black. And having those conversations with people who just recently had transitioned from Ubuntu education to suddenly having more opportunity. I was interested in that just as much as I was interested in speaking to the Minister of Environment or the Minister of Economy, talking about financial crisis and stuff. I was just super curious about the human experience of people.
Yeah.
And what I found is that it doesn't matter who you're speaking to, whether it's a cab driver, receptionist, president of a country, or CEO, chairman of an organization, we're all human inside. And we are all fascinating in our own right. We all have something interesting to say and to share. And so long story short, I went on this journey. I started a company called Mr. Taylor. It was an online tailored suits company. We never did anything with it. A guy wanted to invest 30,000 euros. That's another story entirely. Worked at INSEAD, a business school. I realized that there was a way for me to match my business acumen with my social impact. That was social entrepreneurship. I thought this is amazing. Then I became a country manager at Movember, did a video CV, which doesn't sound pioneering now, but back then nobody did them. So if you want to go and check it out, you can go and check it out with a website. I think it's still on, called thedreamjobwouldbenice.com. Nice. It's got about 900,000 views now. People were like tweeting it to Oprah and Tony Robbins. And it was mad. It was so fun when it went viral. So I did that. Then I got a job at Country Manager at Movember, where I started raising funds and awareness for men's health, raised 2.8 million euros, won a bunch of awards, got 110,000 people to sign up, loved it, amazing. And then I was like, you know what? I could stay here and it would be amazing. And honestly, it was a dream job, but I thought there's this itch inside of me that I've got to scratch, which is starting my own business. And so I did that in 2016. The Unconventionalist was born at the back of a podcast that I launched in 2015. I gave a TEDx talk in 2017 that somehow has resonated with people. It's had over 900,000 views. And it's been a mad journey. Like, I wouldn't say it was a straightforward journey. I've had pivots, I've changed. Even this year, I've had to change because I specialized as a public speaker for a while. So I was getting paid ridiculously well to just go and share my message and story in organizations and stages. And I loved it. But then COVID happened. So then I kind of pivoted. And I went back to what I originally did, was helping founders and entrepreneurs, find and clarify the purpose to better inspire their people and learn the tools of how to share more powerful stories to engage their customers and their employees. And yeah, that's been really cool. Like, I've got to work with some incredible CEOs and entrepreneurs, and just seeing the transformational journey that happens when people start owning their story, right? And start like living from that place of, hey, you know what? I'm not proud of everything that's happened, but it shaped who I am. And I get to have this story now and share it and connect with people. And it just makes it more human, more real. So yeah, I'm fascinated by what it means to be human at work.
That's amazing, bro. And what I think is incredible is that obviously everyone was affected by COVID, and hearing you kind of say, all right, well, I've had to pivot what I'm doing. So I was doing the public speaking, that economy is completely wiped out. So we need to do this, or this is, you still managed to touch, like you said, you've gone back to what you originally did, and you're working with...
Well, so it's adapted, so it's changed, right? So yes, I mean, just being honest, like I was set to have the best year. Like this year was going to be amazing. I was getting booked to go and speak all over. My speaking fees, I was like, okay, I'm just going to throw a crazy number. People say, yeah, cool, and they did. But it was so unreal, man. I would show up to like these big organizations that we've all heard of, and this is how I am. Like the way that you see me now, this is how I rock up. I show up, I'm weirdo. I've got a weird beard, and I just talk funny, and I just shared and I engage, and it was amazing. It was so cool. And honestly, I remember at the beginning of the year, I was focusing on helping better lead and inspire millennials in the workplace. That was like my bread and butter, about purpose at work and how to stop. We have 83% of people disengaged in their workplace, which is mad, right? It's so crazy that you think that so many people go to work without being engaged or enthusiastic about their day ahead. So that's kind of what I did. And then in 6 days, when the government announced the global lockdown, well, national lockdown, and then the kind of spirit. In 6 days, like 95% of my business was wiped out. Boom. Yeah. Everybody pulled out. Not only did they pull out their commitments, they were asking for refunds and blaming it under the Act of God Act, even though normally there's no refund if it's canceled within 90 days, whatever it is. So that was tough. That was a really tough time to navigate. I had a small team of freelancers, on board, so I had to let go. People just said, "Look, we're gonna have to tighten the belt, and I've got no work right now." And so that was tough. Also, it was an opportunity to spend more time with my kids, reassess what was important to me. I had a few clients who were knocking on the doors. A few people came, and look, I was just like, okay, let's go back to coaching and consulting and doing that, and run an online program to help people launch their podcast. And I've been building up towards my Impact Accelerator. And so yeah, it's a kind of a pivot adaptation / coming back to some of my original roots.
So you said, so tell us a little bit more about the Impact Accelerator. Would that again blossom out of, did sort of the current changes change that, impact that at all? Or did you? Yeah,
so it's been kind of one of my crazy projects I've had on kind of one of these shelves in the back of my mind that I've wanted to do for a long time.
Yeah. And
effectively, it's to try and create the next generation of business leaders and to change the way that we think and approach what it means to stand out in your industry. Okay. And it's to create people who lead from a place of authenticity, who want to have a bigger impact in the world, and who want to become, proficient in sharing their stories and clarifying their message. And I just wanted to have a different conversation around that, because I was just tired of getting targeted on Instagram and YouTube and Facebook about these, whether they are real entrepreneurs or fake entrepreneurs, whatever they are, they're just like, hey, have you seen my $6 million Ferrari behind me and my mansion, and I can give you success in 6 days? And I'm going, what a bunch of bull. It's like, no one does that. And so I was getting really mad at that. The image that was being portrayed to people was the only way to be a successful entrepreneur or an impactful entrepreneur was to become this version that seems to be everywhere and spread around these kind of online entrepreneurship. So that was it. And so I took that idea and I worked with a very small handful of one-to-one CEOs and entrepreneurs and founders, and I walked them individually through this program. And the impact's been amazing. Like, just to see how they've shifted internally, how they see themselves, how they communicate about their story, how they actually own their story, how they clarify their message, how they understand and enroll people. Because one thing, and this is going to sound really weird, but I was giving a keynote at an offsite for a really cool company, actually. And the CEO saw me talk and then came up to me at the end. He said, look, I want a piece of that. Like, I want to know how you do what you do, and I want to be able to talk, not like I don't want to talk like you, that sounds really weird, but
I want to do what you,
right. You want to learn, that's right. How do I hold a room like that? How do I impact people with my words? How do I get people excited about the vision that we're trying to go and take this company on? I was like, cool, look, let's do it. And for 6 months we worked together, and it was incredible just to unpack his ability to impact. Because a lot of leaders, what's interesting is that my people tend to be quote unquote successful people in their industries, right? They tend to be 6 or 7 figures, founders of and business leaders of service business companies, that kind of stuff. They're doing well, but they tend to not like the idea of being in the spotlight. And as a Dent KPI, you'll know this, like, it's not about being in the spotlight, it's about becoming the spotlight. And I see them, and one of the biggest things they have is like, my story doesn't matter. Like, they don't see how their story has anything to do with business. They don't see how speaking at the customers might be an issue rather than speaking with. And so it's just all this stuff that's been unpacked, and I've packaged it into a 12-step program that I'll be launching in Q1 in 2021 with a really small select group of people. And I'm really, like, I haven't been excited for something like this for a long time, because I know the transformational impact it will have on their people, but more than that, I know the ripple effect it'll have on the world. I know it sounds really weird, but by having these people go out and start owning their message and start sharing their story and start connecting with people in a much more powerful way, then I think it feeds into our mission that is at the Unconventionalist, to help you have an impact on the world with your message.
Yeah, definitely. What's it like for people that are maybe new to business or maybe looking to get into business? How would that help them? Is it something?
It's not geared at all for people who are just starting off.
Okay.
I mean, it's just not. I've got 1,000 stuff out there for those people. Like, there's my TEDx talk. I've got a book called "It's Not You, It's Me" that they can get. If they go to my website, theunconventionalist.com/book, they can get it for free. Like I've got a bunch of resources. I've got a 3-part video series training called How to Clarify Your Message. It's on my website. Okay. All that they can get for free. They can get started. But what I will say is this though, and if you've seen my TEDx talk, then you'll know what I'm about to say, right? And I'm not the only one saying this. Like I'm not pretending like I hold, the only truth on this, but I do believe that we have overemphasized the glorification of becoming an entrepreneur to the point where people who would be perfectly super happy and fulfilled working in an organization that matches their values, that is on a great mission they want to be part of, who's got a clear and compelling purpose, and people they love working with, would be much happy in that setting as part of a community than they would being on their own trying to build something from scratch. I truly believe that. I'm not saying that no one can start a business, of course, but we've got to readdress the situation, which is you may be well suited for entrepreneurship and you may flourish as an entrepreneur and you may not. And there's no shame in that. It doesn't mean that you're better or that you're worse. Like I remember having a conversation in Spain. I was in Madrid at this kind of rooftop bar, and this guy was there, 21-year-old, who was a fundraiser for November, and he invited me for a drink and stuff to say thanks for dropping by. He was one of the highest fundraising teams. And he said to me, and it stayed with me, he said, we were having a chat about him. I'm naturally like incredibly curious about people, and I always asked about their story. Like I'm deeply personal, so people might be a bit weird. It's like, hey, tell me about like your deepest and darkest fears, whatever. So I was having this chat with him, and he said it's really weird because I feel like most of my peers feel like failures. And I was like, what do you mean? Like that guy's like 19, 20. What are you talking about? Yeah, we haven't started a Snapchat or a Facebook yet. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah, most people by this age in Silicon Valley already making millions. Like, wow, we've so distorted what it means to be fulfilled, what it means to have an impact. And so my big conversation with people listening to this, and I don't want to put you off, I'm not saying that starting a business is a bad thing. For some people it's the best thing. For some people they love it. Like you might, Shaq, you might be going like, oh, it's the best thing in the world. And that's great. But what I'll tell you is this. I think what is not spoken about, and you can go and anybody listening to this, go and check out my TEDx talk because I talk about this in greater detail. What we don't talk about enough is the hardship behind the veneer of social media, behind the show reel that everyone's showing you all their best versions of their life. You don't get to see the inner doubt, the mindset shift that happens, the wobbles, the seasons of doubt, all that stuff that happens that is really hard. And as someone who interviews a lot of people on my podcast, as someone who's been with people who we all follow online and have conversations behind closed doors, I can tell you everyone struggles in one way, shape or form, right? Whether they admit it or not, whether it's big or small, it doesn't matter. It's tough. It's tough for a reason, and it gets tougher. I've got a mate, he built a business. They've got over 100 employees, generating millions and millions of revenue a year. And he's like, his problems just escalate. Like bigger the business, bigger the problem. When COVID happened, he had a situation on his hand. He was like, how do we stay afloat? How do we make sure we keep everybody's jobs when we've got our overheads are insane, right? So, that's what I would say. But if you're starting off, there's some great resources you could go and check out. I think Noah Kagan from AppSumo is brilliant. He's come on my show. I think he's super realist. Like, if you want to understand the basics of sales as an entrepreneur, go and check out Tim Ferriss and Noah Kagan on Creative Live. You can Google that on YouTube. And they have a masterclass in person of trying to teach someone how to actually sell a product. It's brilliant. Go and check that out. And then you've got, obviously Daniel Priestley's KPI book, Keep Us of Influence, a great book. That's kind of where I would leave that on that.
Brilliant. That's excellent because I think it's E-Myth where he breaks down what you're saying is that where
Michael E. Gerber.
Yeah. So it's then thinking, well, actually I could do this for myself. When in reality, if you're at a company where the values are right, you actually are better off because you don't have the added stress and all the other things that you get.
Right. 100%. And like people keep on talking about this thing about passive income. Like, I don't know what your take is, right? Like I'm just like, there's no such thing as passive income. Like you've got to work for whatever you're going to get. Like, right. Even if you're in real estate, right? Like if you're going to be in real estate, you're going to have to build your portfolio. You're still going to manage contractors. You're still going to have to make sure that your management team's in place. You're going to make, like, there's still stuff you're going to do, even if you're still getting that revenue coming in. Right. So like, I just want to say that because the best passive income in the world is getting a job. Because when you're on holiday, you get paid. When you're on weekend, you're still getting paid. When you go home at night, you're still getting paid. If you're sick, you're still getting paid. When you're starting off a business, you haven't got any of those things at the start. right? Like unless you go through the VC route, you're getting funding, maybe. But for most people, the vast majority listening to this, you don't understand what your reptile brain does to you when your livelihood depends on your actions, right? Because when you're in a job, it's cushy, it's comfortable. Some people call it the golden prison. I get that. And you're like, man, if I was out there, I'd be crushing it. I'd be going to the gym every day. I'd be going, I could have so much free time. And then suddenly you're left with that dying feeling of, oh, if I don't make a sale today, or if I don't make a sale this week, how am I going to pay rent? And then suddenly reptile brain starts going, why did you do this? And your creativity goes out the window. And that's just something people need to understand. Now, people are going to be like, oh, you're such a party pooper, Mark. I'm not. I just want to say a different version of what most people don't talk about, so you can have all the information you need and you can go, I still want to do it. Then great. And at least when this happens to you, you'll feel, oh yeah, Mark did mention this is going to happen. It's not just me. I'm not a loser. There's nothing wrong with me. It's part of the process. And I can make the decision to keep going or going back and doing something different.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I was going to touch on your TED talk, but really you've kind of answered it. It was just to really work out what it is that they don't tell us about entrepreneurship, and that's 100% it. That is 100% it. I often like to ask, so I always do ask guests the name of their favorite book or audio book. But seeing as you're an author, can you please tell us a bit about your book titled It's Not You, It's Me, and what inspired you to create the book and what will readers get from it?
Yeah, that's an old book I wrote in 2013. Hey, yeah, buddy. Awesome stuff. Yeah,
signed. This one's signed as well, guys.
Yeah. You know what? That's what.
Hate too much.
Keep that, mate, because that's like a first edition version as well.
I was going to add, the Unconventional Hustler.
Oh, that's where you got it. Yeah, there you go. That was it. Yeah, that's where you got it. Because I thought, like, where the hell did Chad find that? 'Cause I haven't. Yeah, that's where it is. So, So the book I wrote in 2013, and it's a book I wanted to read because I used to be a life coach. I used to coach people in the evenings, very late at night and very early in the morning while I had a full-time job and weekends. And it was unfulfilled professionals and careers seeking to do more meaningful and purposeful work. Yeah. And they kept on asking me questions about my journey, kept on asking me about how I did it. So I wrote this book really to kind of lay out how I went about it, the questions that helped me, some of the coaching exercise that you can do on your own. And I still get random messages when people read it. Like, I don't promote it, I don't talk about the book. But I'm writing at the moment. So I've just actually finished writing a vomit draft on my second book, 75,000 words. So I've got a lot of chopping to do. Yeah, but and so I'm speaking with different publishers at the moment with Book Agent. So that'll probably coming out 2021, 2022, depending on how quickly we can get it over the line. But that's going to be a book. So the first book is going to be a book series, but the first book's going to be about how to overcome imposter syndrome as an entrepreneur. So basically helping people who got this great business, maybe it'll be a business idea, they're running this great business, but they don't like putting themselves out there, they're not comfortable, they feel like a bit awkward, they don't like social media. It's like, basically, how do you learn to be yourself in public, and how do you get to embrace your story in a compelling way? So that's going to be the book. So I'm excited about that. But I'll tell you, actually, I've got so many books I could recommend. A book lately, you know what, I'll start with this. The latest book I read, who had a really great impact on me, is Donald Miller, A Million Miles in 1,000 Years. As someone I'm obsessed with storytelling. And it's really interesting because Donald Miller started a really successful business called Storybrand, and now Business Made Simple University. And what's interesting is this book, you can see how this book is the start of that seed that he then went off and built this really great business. It is effectively the story of this guy who wrote memoirs, did very well, but was deeply miserable and unsatisfied, and this producer team buy the rights to make his biography into a film, and then realizes that his life isn't as exciting as what it could be, and so changes his life to match the excitement of what a story should be. It's a really great, like, I really recommend it as a read. It's an easy read.
What I love about, thank you for that book. What I love about your book that you're working on is that I suffered from all of those things. I was very, I've always been very private. It's weird, I'm a bit of an oxymoron. So even though, like, you know, I was talking about the music and I don't like crowds. I've never liked, my former business partner forced me to go onto social media because like, you have to do it. So when I was like, I like my privacy. I'm very, very private. And then And then often a lot of things that I talk about, I never really used to see the value in it. It's only, I guess, on one-on-one I talk about it, and maybe someone say, oh, I got a lot of value from it. But when I'm sitting there, I don't realize there's the value there. So often I felt like it was imposter syndrome.
100%.
I couldn't talk about things because I felt like, well, I don't know, I can't validate how much of it I know myself. So
right, and it's hard. It's like what I've noticed, right? When I speak with, I'm always surprised by the amount of people I speak to who I find fascinating, super interesting, and inspiring, and they don't see themselves as that. And they don't see it, and it's like, trust me, I've had enough conversation that like 500 graduates have gone through my online podcasting course. Like, if you want to launch a podcast, you can go and check that out.
Wow.
And I've had enough conversations with these people to understand, like, wow, this is so important. Like this, just top of my head, I know I'm thinking about this particular one, but she wanted to do a podcast about miscarriages. Like, there's just not enough conversations about the taboo of miscarriage for women and dads. And I thought, this is brilliant. Like, how many times have I been surprised by hearing someone having to go through that on their own? And I wish there was a better conversation around it. So, and she was like, but do you think it's? I was like, of course it's a good idea. So we are all victim of this tragedy of going to our grave with our song unsung, right? And so my biggest wish is that everybody could get an opportunity to sing their song, no matter what that song sounds like, no matter what that song ends up being, but that they can go to the grave knowing, like, I tried, I gave it a shot, you know? And that I think is why the Unconventionalist really exists. No,
that's brilliant. How long have you been doing Unconventionalist now?
So I launched the podcast in 2015, and then I went full time on my kind of gig in 2016. So it's going to be 5 years, I think, next year. I'm celebrating my 5th year anniversary. Yeah, it's been mad. It's been such a cool roller coaster journey. I'm still a baby. It's still an infant. It still feels like there's so much I'm learning and growing, but really it's, and this was an ego lesson for me to see that my clients and my customers doing better than me, and actually achieving these amazing things. And I'll be honest, at first I was super triggered. Like, my God, what's wrong with me? Like, I'm not as good. I need to be better than. But then I realized, actually, no, I don't. You know, look at some of the greatest coaches in the world, in athletes and sports. They might not have, you know, Zidane is not one of them. Like, I wouldn't consider him as a good example of someone who didn't achieve that. But some of the greatest coaches weren't necessarily some of the greatest players, isn't necessarily the greatest achievements. But it's really finding joy in actually championing and rooting others. So I'll give you an example. So there's this business podcast awards thing that I submitted, and the natural kind of reactivity to that would be to keep it to myself and not tell anyone. I've emailed everyone I know who are my students on my podcast course, and I was like, hey guys, there's this thing that you've got 24 hours to submit this. I've applied, you should all go for this, and I hope you're going to win. And I generally hope that they're all going to win. Even if that means I don't win, I don't care, because I'll be like, you've won, that means I win. Like, when you win, I win. And that has been a really, like, if I could share one big thing I've learned about business recently, it's that. And I'm not proud of it. Like, I'm ashamed of saying that I had these reactions and ego and all this stuff. But actually what I've realized is, wow, when we stop seeing each other's competition, but actually seeing each other's collaboration, it's so much more exciting. Like, there's so much, like George Bettany, the co-founder of Sanctus, was one of the first who kind of really taught me that. You know, he really generally is like, if you win, I win. Right? It's like, oh God, what is it called? In South Africa. I think it's Ubuntu. I could be wrong. I think it's Ubuntu, which is an expression that basically it's all about that. It's only when you win do I win.
Okay. And
some coaches have adopted that as a philosophy for their sports teams and stuff, and just making it as one. And I wish we could all see it that way. I wish we could stop being so paranoid about what other people do and how little do we feel when we compare ourselves to others, and go, you know what, you're doing great, amazing. I wish you all the best, because by you getting bigger, you're making our industry bigger, right? Like that, by getting more people to your business, you're creating more awareness. That means there'll be a bigger net for all of us. So
it's an amazing outlook, and such a really, say mature, but such a really good outlook to have. I was going to ask you what was one of maybe your key sort of takeaways from getting to this stage within the podcast, but that sounds like an amazing And
I mean that one, and it's much harder in practice than it is. For some people, it's super simple and straightforward. For others, it's harder. But no, I mean, one of them. Again, I think I'll say there's two things I've learned. I think it's we're all the same. Like really, we are all the same deep down. We may look different, we may sound different, we may walk differently, but we're all the same. Like we all got the same aspirations, the same fears, the same dreams, the same hopes. Like we all believe the same. Like that's what fascinates me. Like the more I do this work, the more I interview people, the more I interact with people, the more I'm like, you think you're alone, but you're not, right? Like I used to do this exercise. I don't know if I did it with you, with your group. But I used to do this exercise where I'd say to people, write down on a piece of paper, what are you most afraid of? What are you most afraid of that people will find out about you? What is getting in your way of putting yourself out there, right? You
did do this with us.
Did I do that? Yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah. I love
this. I don't remember, but then I got everybody to write this on the paper, but I don't tell these people. So this is a spoiler alert for people if you ever get to work with me again. But I get them to fold that piece of paper, and then I go share it to the person next to you, and there's usually a few giggles, and I'm like, wait up. And I go and take it to a different table, move it around. So it kind of moves around. So by this point, usually no one should know who they're holding in their hand because it's anonymous. And then I go on the count of 3, open this piece of paper. 1, 2, 3, boom. And there's usually a massive laugh or a sense of relief in the room and I go, who here can identify with what's written in their hand? And 9 times out of 10, I'll get at least a 70% hands raised. And then some people are just like introverts and don't want to do it or whatever. But that's the truth. And that's what's crazy. So that would be that number 1. And then number 2, I think it would be like one of my values I have at the Unconventionalist we have is called always be caring. And people confuse caring with being soft or weak. It's not. It's like no matter what you do, just care enough, like give a shit. That's what I would say, like to anyone's like just care enough, because if you care enough, that means if you're going to let go someone and you do it in a caring way, you can do it in a human way. If you show your people, your customers that you care, usually on the long term you're going to win. That's kind of how I see it.
And that's care through just having a caring manner and your approach, the way you speak.
It's just a philosophy. It's just, I believe that. So there's this Glengarry Glen film, I forgot what it's called now, with Alec Baldwin. It's like a mythical film that's based on a play. Okay. And he walks into this sales operation, and people listening to this might recognize this. And he comes in and he's like, it's a super famous scene for most sales teams and like recruiters, and he comes in and he basically schools them and rips them a new one about how their sales numbers are really down. And he says, A, B, C, always be closing, always be closing. It's like this really famous scene. And I kind of took that and I changed to always be caring. And you know, because that means that if a customer complains, if you get called out, like how can you respond in a caring way? That's it. But caring caring doesn't mean that you don't do the tough things. Like you've got to do hard things in business. You've got to make tough decisions. You've got to let people go. You've got to cut supplies. You've got to do things, right? Like there are going to be things that are involved that you're going to be uncomfortable with. But if you can come from a place of care and you can operate from that, then I think you're going to do well on the long run.
Yeah, that sounds great. That sounds brilliant. Another, when you're talking about if we all kind of are the same, we all have things. I think someone said once, like, we all love our mums. You know, no matter where everyone loves somebody. We've all got something that's dear to us. And as much as often people see the differences, they'll see, oh, you're a man, I'm a woman. You're black, I'm white. It's like, but we all love our mums. We all like food. We all like things. And it's a really simple way to put it, but it's
and it's a skill. Empathy is a skill. Being able to say, let me listen to what you have to say before I tell you what I think. Yeah, is hard, right? Like it's hard because I think especially the way that we're raised, especially depending on which society you're raised, depending on what education you've had, the media will portray, right? Like it's all of this plays into your subconscious. And so we saw it recently with the US elections. My best mate lives out on the West Coast. Okay. And he said it's scary how polarizing the elections are. Well, because he goes, the moment you know which color you are, whether you're blue or red, right? Everything else doesn't matter. Everything else doesn't matter. Yeah. You could be a really loyal friend. Yeah. You could be a really caring son. You could be someone who does their very best to show up every day and be in much integrity if you want. But if you're a Republican or a Democrat, I just have nothing in common with you, and I want nothing, and that for me,
it's crazy.
It's tribalism, and it's tribalism. It's scary. I think it's very scary because when we fall into that trap, we forget our humanity. And that's when you start seeing dehumanization, and when you start seeing people justifying, calling each other names, justifying, making fun of each other. That's why, like, I try and not jump on the bandwagon of, insulting people or making jokes or fun about whatever. Look, there's no secret about it. Like, I'm not a Donald Trump fan, right? But I still wouldn't go and make really negative, because I think, this is my opinion. But when you act in the way that he acts, I think adding more pain to what he's probably already feeling isn't helping what we're needing. Like, I know it sounds silly, but like, I don't know if you got kids, Shaq, but I've got 2 kids. Have you got kids? Yeah, so I've got 2 kids. And you see it as kids, the vast majority of kids, there might be some few little shits that I've met, but the vast majority of kids are they're just awesome. They're just like, they just want to play. They're just the embodiment of love, and they're just the embodiment of just like spirit. It's the condition of them. It's the environment in which we build around them that will then shape their experiences. And I heard this amazing interview from the HR director of True Color, TRU Color. If you haven't heard about them, go and check them out. They're an American organization that only hire active gang members. It's awesome. Oh, wow. Yeah, it's really cool. And she said, what did she say? Opportunity is a leveling. It's like something like opportunity is an equalizer. And I love that. It's like giving as many people opportunities will be an equalizer in society, right? Like, just that alone, I just thought, like, so how can I create more opportunities?
I love that. I'm just digesting it because, and I'm playing it out in my head, and it's so true. It's so true. It creates balance, doesn't it?
Yeah. And look, I told you this, and unfortunately I'm gonna have to go real soon. But I told you this at the beginning. Like, when I was in this school, and I was on quote unquote with, thugs and burglars and drug dealers. Yeah. Like, on the outside, people were like, oh my God, but I got to know them, and they're my mates.
There's normal people. Yeah.
They're just normal people, just making some bad decisions and just being around some people who lead them the wrong way. But ultimately, that was it. I think if, it's really weird. I think I like to connect to the humanity of people. Yeah. And I think we all have a humanity. Like if you sat me in a room with Donald Trump for long enough, you'll find something.
Yeah.
100%. 100% I'll find something. I'll find a common ground. And I think we're so quick to shut down looking for common grounds. Yeah. And you see this in business negotiations. You see this in politics, in racial conversation. Like, everything, we're going to find ways of saying yes, but, right? And instead of going like, okay, what's the 2% truth? How can I stay curious?
Yeah. It's true. Before you go, I just wanted to ask you, what if you was to start something new? So if you start a new business, how would you sort of go about doing that now? And what do you think you'd do? What would be
the first thing I would do differently would be to get a co-founder.
To get a co-founder?
100%. Yeah. Okay. The first thing I would do right now, even before I do anything, is like, I would find someone else to do this with. I wouldn't do it alone.
Brilliant.
Yeah, that'd be like the first thing. Would be like, and Richard Reed told me this advice. Richard Reed was the co-founder of Innocent.
Shout out to Richard Reed, man.
Yeah, and he basically
I've seen Innocent blow up from, I think they used to be on like Lavender Hill. And then I've just seen them just go.
Yeah. Well, they sold to Coca-Cola, didn't they? Yeah. So he was at an event, and I got to ask him questions at the end and stuff, and he said to me, build a team as quickly as possible. Like, just get other people involved, because the reason why is,
I love that,
you can't convince a co-founder to come on board. That means your vision's not big enough. That means that your problem solving isn't meaningful enough.
Love that.
And that means you're not excited about the project. So it will be an automatic filter to see, can I get someone to do the craziest thing of all, to bet everything on this idea, just on an idea alone. So if you can get that, that'd be the first thing I'd do, because then the other thing is, there's obviously, you've got the classic thing of what you're good at, what does the world need, and what is the world willing to pay for.
Yep.
Right, like that's the trifecta stuff. That is quite a good one. The Ikigai is another way of doing it. It's kind of a Japanese ancient wisdom 4 squares. Again, like, you can look at that, but I would honestly just think about what is around me that I have a problem with, that I want to fix, because people don't understand that passion comes from the Latin word pain. That's why the film is called The Passion of Christ, the pain of Christ.
Yeah.
So people say follow your passion, but actually look for your pain points. Look for what you are tired of experiencing that you would want to change. What can you make something that is quicker, better, faster, more efficient, cost effectively, healthier, whatever. And if you want to hear loads of stories, you can go and check out the Unconventionalist podcast, where I talk about loads of people who they share the background story of how they started. But that's how I do. Yeah, that would be my advice.
I think that's amazing, bro. I just want to say thanks for coming on. And I'm going to let you go. Just before you go, where can people find you online? What's the best way to connect?
Yeah, appreciate that. So I'm at Mark Leruste on all social media platforms. So Instagram is kind of where I hang out the most, but I'm on Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, all that kind of stuff. And then if you want to put a smile on your face every other week when I do write a newsletter, come and check it out on the unconventionalist.com/newsletter, I think it is. But yeah, otherwise, anything, just type in Mark Leruste. Google me. As wanky as that sounds, Google me, you'll find me.
Excellent. You've been a phenomenal guest, Mark. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Shaq. Appreciate it, brother.
And look forward to seeing you soon, brother.
100%.
Take it easy. Thanks for coming.